Sumo Digital's Texas Chainsaw Massacre game fully embraces the essence of this famed iconic horror franchise, whose antagonists share a malevolent desire to kill, torture, and wear their victims. Oh, they also make home decor out of them, so at least these guys are resourceful.
What the hell?
It really drives home that intense rustic grittiness that makes you consistently uncomfortable. Everything looks suitably disorganized because to the killers this is more a lifestyle, not just a hobby. You're never quite sure if the multitude of stains that linger in the maps are someone's life force, juices, or just grease, but probably the former. I'll be honest here. When this game was initially announced, there wasn't a bone in my body that believed that this game would launch in a balanced, playable state. Of course, obviously this was pure speculation. However, the developer and publisher don't really have the most praised history. Sumo Digital doesn't have a lot of well-known work, and their most notable work was entirely underwhelming. Yeah, that's right, I'm looking at you, Crackdown 3.
Fucking thing sucks!
Gun Media is the publisher here, and they were entangled in the Friday the 13th debacle on launch. A game that didn't see much in the way of acceptable quality of life improvements to keep myself interested, or even many others. So, my skepticism wasn't completely unjustified, even though we really shouldn't judge a game by its cover. However, this game about a murderous inbred with a chainsaw doesn't just nail its source material, it also managed to stand on its own two bloody soaked feet by offering tense gameplay, incredibly unsettling atmosphere, and a divergence of the subgenre's molds by changing the odds up, having 3 killers actively hunting their victims instead of the traditional 1. I firmly believe that if enough people enjoy this experience, it can end up being a title that can maybe even come close to competing with Dead by Daylight, a game that still somehow holds the crown thanks to its wide diversity of content and also its huge content creation fanbase. Since launch, I have managed to cut my way through this game's systems, getting an understanding of how every aspect of the game gels together. This asymmetrical formula has a lot going for it, its gameplay loop in particular, but it also has areas that could use some fine-tuning to make the overall experience more enjoyable for the game's longevity's sake. All of which will be covered in today's video. So the core of Texas Chainsaw revolves around repeated games that focus on a cat and mouse style tug of war where killers must use their wits, tools, and abilities to find and kill their prey before any of them manage to escape. It's built around an asymmetrical approach, meaning that each player is individually different in their spawns and their abilities. These teams are also uneven, featuring scenarios where 3 killers are hunting 4 victims who are tasked with escaping their multi-stage rustic prisons. I initially thought that having 3 killers on one map would not only be really way less intuitive, but also I didn't think the maps were going to be big enough to justify having 3 killers on them. But as far as I can tell in my 15 hours, everything is quite well balanced. Each character has their own abilities, upgrade trees, and attribute points that can be used to build out your character the way that you want to. And I'll dive deeper into this soon. But regardless of what side you find yourself on, you'll come to find quite quickly that while each team's goals and gameplay are different, they both share a commonality, and that is the importance of teamwork if you wish to succeed. The 4 victims start each match hopelessly bound up and hanging in a dilapidated cellar. The distant sounds of chainsaws revving rings out off the damp, decrepit wall, signaling your impending doom. You wiggle out of your restraints and find yourself thrust into a life and death situation in tight spaces. This setup is pretty damn terrifying, and while you never feel safe regardless of how many people you surround yourself with, if you are smart, you'll work together to get out of there in one piece using the various tools and navigational barriers found around the map to thwart your pursuers. There is absolutely no space for downtime. The clock is constantly ticking, and the longer you linger, the more time the killers have to get leverage over you. Leatherface is an immediate threat as he spawns in the basement with you, while the other 2 killers have to wait until the survivors make enough noise to be able to journey down. If you're fast enough and lucky enough, you can beat them to it and reach ground level before they even know what's going on. Additionally, the victims have multiple elements they have to balance to not only live longer, but to evade the people that want to literally cut your face off like it's just another Sunday at Grandpa's. Each victim has to contend with a depleting blood supply from the wounds that they sustained during an attack, a move that was probably ultimately done so survivors couldn't draw out matches by consistently evading foes and hiding. Now, this effect can be mitigated by relying on bottles of health and avoiding taking hits if at all possible, even though, not gonna lie, it's pretty damn hard to get out of these matches unscathed. Holy shit! Holy shit! Okay. Okay, no. Okay, and I'm dead. I'm dead. Thankfully though, as long as you're being smart, this hindrance gives you plenty of time. While balancing that, players will also have to keep track of how much noise they're making, as noise plays a pivotal role in allowing killers to hone in on your location. Certain objects emit more noise than others, and if it's loud enough, an indication of this noise will be displayed for everyone in the entire lobby to see. Triggering traps, opening certain doors, and specific escape routes all make it way easier for the killers to find you. Thankfully, this ability isn't one-sided though. Both victims and killers can generate noise, helping you avoid specific areas that may have high traffic. The tonality of the gameplay shifts seamlessly between roles, and what I really mean by that is that playing the victim is heart-poundingly scary, and I don't care if poundingly isn't a word, I used it. Whereas playing as a family member gives you this almost maniacal power fantasy without them being too powerful. But victims are consistently vulnerable and almost entirely at the mercy of the killers if you're found. I've played many asymmetrical horror games in my time as a gamer. I played Left 4 Dead, Dead by Daylight, Evil Dead the game, which just came out last year, and then the Troubled, I guess that's the right word, Troubled Friday the 13th game. Each of these have their own positives and negatives, but I can safely say that none of them managed to scare me quite like this game did. This game presented situations and scares that are almost akin to a single-player horror experience with scripted moments of fright. Some of these moments really caught me off guard. Oh god. They don't see me, do they? But you know what else caught me off guard? And I mean this in a good way? How much content there is on offer at launch for an indie Game Pass game. You can tell from the moment you boot this game up and you're met with that iconic screen crawl with narration, or all the way to the signature camera shutter sound effect that has tainted my brain since childhood. I can't get it out of here. And you can tell that this game was developed by people who hold its inspiration in high regard. There are numerous outfits to unlock for the victims and Leatherface. Now, unfortunately, the other killers didn't get this treatment, which sucks, most likely due to the fact that their appearance remained the same for the duration of the first film's runtime. I do, however, think that it would have went a long way if the developers took some creative liberties with the characters to give them some kind of unique unlockables. I don't know a lot about this business, and for all I know, this was an intention that may have crossed their minds, but these older horror properties do tend to have really strict creative licensing. Now, the victims have quite a few options for clothing, but nothing more than just simple reshades of the same attire, working towards unlocking them. I mean, to me, it seemed pretty meaningless. But much to my surprise, there are also several digital goodies to unlock for fans of the series, with behind-the-scenes pictures that have their own bios to see what it was like during the making of the film. I'm sure anyone who is intrinsically interested in these movies has already probably seen everything on offer here, but it's also here for the newcomers as well should they find themselves interested in what spawned the inception of the game in the first place. Accompanying these photos are also concept art from the making of the game. I don't know why, but I personally love when developers add these inclusions in games because it adds some kind of personality, and it also lets you see what the game started as and what it ended up as. It also helps to see just how much work went into this game, and I'm just a sucker for concept art. I love that stuff. But back to content. Perhaps the most important content comes in the form of its wide cast of playable characters and the 3 maps, seeing how the gameplay loop literally revolves around them. All 5 killers and victims have their own predetermined strengths and weaknesses, meaning that your playstyle will change and so will what you can and can't get away with. For instance, this hunk right here, Leland, is build for tough, lending him the upper hand in combat with the family. But he's loud and his proficiency with tools is downright horrible. But his build allows him to be capable of stunning and even knocking over his pursuers to gain the upper hand. Julie is my personal favorite and go-to due to the fact that her primary strength is stealth, which is inherently a pretty important part of the game. But she too also has drawbacks. She's weak, making scrapping with the family a horrible option, and her stamina isn't the greatest. On the other hand, the family members and how they are utilized can not only change the flow of a map, but also determine the outcome of a match. Leatherface himself is a force to be reckoned with. He's capable of destroying navigational handicaps around the map, limiting the victim's escape options and maneuverability. That's pretty dangerous because you rely a lot on these environmental handicaps. The sadistic hitchhiker is the trap mastermind. If you play him right, you'll learn to place these traps in pivotal areas, and these traps won't just dish damage but expose their location, making it easier to hunt them. Lastly, and my go-to is Sissy, and she's capable of poisoning certain objects around the map and also blowing a cloud of poison that'll deal damage to players over time. Now, all of these aforementioned characters come with their own unique abilities bound to that specific character. With that, they have large upgrade trees, perks to unlock and equip, as well as attribute points to shape the character how you want, which I was happy to see. All of these can be purchased with upgrade points, which are earned through natural progression by simply playing the game. Yes, there are no microtransactions here or pay-to-win systems. Thank God. These large skill trees have 3 upgrade paths each, and only one of them can be chosen at one time, locking the other 2 off. Luckily, if you do end up not liking your current build and you want to restart, it's relatively easy to respec your skills into another tree. Skill trees are also where you attain perks and attribute points to spend. Now, these attribute points can be assigned under that column with the very same name and are used to improve your character to be more effective in multiple areas such as proficiency with tools, stamina, and so on. Perks offer a wide range of passive bonuses that can not only help you, but others around you. For instance, I have a perk on Julie that highlights all doors and tools for the first 30 seconds after breaking free. This is a huge advantage, allowing you to beeline right for the tools you need instead of having to linger in the basement looking for items. These too can have negative effects on the killers, like longer stun durations. Likewise, the killers have perks that can increase the radius of noisemakers and how long it takes players to pick locks. So as you can tell by now, there's a lot of content to work towards, especially if you want to build out multiple characters. However, and I'm gonna get into a little bit of bad here, doing so requires a significant time commitment. Now, that's not really bad in hindsight because you want something naturally to work towards, but in my 15 hours of playtime, I have leveled up about 18 times, and each level naturally requires more XP. But in later levels, it can take 3 to 4 matches to rank up just once. And that's if you're doing well in these matches. Upgrading only really nets you 5 upgrade points at a time, so it's quite the grind. Actually, I'm just realizing how much of a grind it actually is. This is just kind of the nature of gaming now and games like this, and it's good in a sense that if you enjoy the gameplay loop, the game is offering you something to consistently work towards. But it would be nice if the game was a little bit more generous with its XP, especially if the game wants to work towards keeping an active player base. And while we're here on the topic of XP, most people, myself included, are going to want to pick a character that suits their playstyle the most and dump all of their points into making that character the best they can be. And the game doesn't necessarily punish you for doing this, but it will eventually leave you at a disadvantage when the character you've been leveling is locked for you because someone else in that lobby is currently playing them. There can't be any duplicate characters, so it's best to save points and level a few characters alongside each other so others don't outrank you to an insane degree. However, we have a topic flip here, and here's a question. Do you like old people? Because you're gonna hate Grandpa. The family members have an upgrade station that sits around the map. Literally sits around the map, and that's Grandpa. The best killer of them all, they say, but actually he's pretty useless as a physical threat, but upgrading him grants a sonar-like ability that will highlight victims if they're moving when Grandpa screams. I would say that this mechanic is integral to the success of the killers, though I've seen killers win without using him, but their chances do really increase if you use him, especially if you have a team of victims that knows what they're doing. You naturally upgrade him by feeding him blood. That's That's natural, right? Yeah. This resource is found in buckets around the map, but also from victims whether you just slice them or steal their soul entirely. It's honestly a great mechanic, especially because these maps are larger than I anticipated. Despite my praise though, I do think he could use some minor tweaking. If you manage to get Grandpa to max level, which honestly if you're working hard as a team, it's really not that hard to get him to max level relatively quickly. And doing so reveals every victim around the map each time he screams. Mind you, his screams become more frequent the higher his level. Outwardly, this doesn't seem like such a bad idea, because it can prevent games from dragging out if victims decide to hide in one spot the entire game. But personally, I experienced a few games where the killers managed to achieve his abilities max level within the first 5 minutes of the game, making it almost impossible to escape because every 30 seconds my location was being exposed. On one hand, I get its purpose, and I don't think it necessarily needs a nerf, but I do think showing the player's location every other screen would be a lot more fair. That or implementing something to counteract this by giving the players items that they can use at their own discretion to avoid detection for at least a brief amount of time. Mind you, victims can only hold 2 items at a time, meaning that would be a decision the player needs to decide if picking up that item and losing a possible part to escape is worth it. But it would add something to mitigate how OP Grandpa can be at max level. Now, as of right now on launch, there are 3 maps in total: Slaughterhouse, Farmhouse, and Gas Station. Each of these 3 maps has 3 time variants: midday, dusk, and night. While I understand a lot of people are going to say that really there are 9 maps because of the difference in time of day, there really aren't. It would be different if these changes in light added or subtracted from the experience to change how the maps or strategies you employ on them work, but they really don't. So really it's just a stylistic difference. 3 maps may not seem like a ton, and that's because in this day and age it really isn't, but no run will be the same. Each time you play, items and their placements will be randomized, making it impossible to memorize where things are. Trust me, I have tried. Every time it's different. All of these maps have a generous amount of hiding spots, navigational obstacles for some of the killers, and also items. They flow pretty nicely, and because there are a lot of tight spaces in the interiors, losing pursuers can be quite easy at times if you're being smart about it. Even dark corners of the house can save your life. A minor gripe I have with these 3 maps is they look kind of similar to each other in their overgrowth, harsh, metallic design. And with that said, it is also hard to critique it for this because this is what the series is known for. This is the aesthetic of the series. And the series is also known for something else. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies have always had a music and sound design that made you feel uneasy because it amplified the horror that you were witnessing on screen. Sometimes a sound without an image is all you really need because the sound is so tactile and so visceral that you can just imagine the imagery in your head, which in all honesty is probably worse. This game clearly carries that tradition from the moment you start up the game. The music is eerie and revs up every time a family member is around, allowing that fight or flight instinct to kick in, and you just don't know if you should book it or just hold your ground. The tension can ramp up really quickly just from the music. The sound design in general is great. The audio quality is crisp, so you can make out footsteps and other audio cues that can help you. Hearing footsteps growing louder with a chainsaw idling is great stuff, even though it's terrifying. But I will say I would kind of like to see a little bit more oomph to the footsteps, because outside of Leatherface, some of the other players' footsteps are a little bit quiet. Alright, now we're on to the issues segment, and there's quite a few I want to go over. I already talked about Grandpa, but there are a few issues I had with my playtime, some related to performance and some not. Unfortunately, in this day and age, bugs in games are about as common as snow in Canada. Trust me, I know, I live there. First, I'll say that the graphical presentation is pretty stunning at times. It by no means compares to the advances of bigger budget games like the new Call of Duties or God of War. Its style is still great, and how it uses lighting makes the game eye-catching at times. I haven't experienced any frame drops, which is great, that's a big plus, but I did have 3 crashes. The first 2 days after launch presented the game with a lot of server issues, I mean a lot. I had several games disband just as I was about to escape, items randomly wouldn't let me pick them up mid-game, and my friend got stuck on a button prompt right as we were about to escape only breaking free from it after the killers took a swing at him. Luckily, he still managed to escape, so man, that was intense. You can do it. You can do it. Come on, keep running. Keep running. Keep running. You can do it. Oh my god. These issues can be frustrating, that's my point, but nothing is more angering than losing connection to the servers mid-match and losing all of your rewards and XP. I will though give kudos to the studio for managing to build in a performance and graphics mode for the Xbox Series S that we seldom see. Something that AAA studios can't be bothered with, and that to me shows that they wanted all gamers to have the best possible experience regardless of platform. Hats off to them. With that said, there are certain balancing tweaks that I would like to see that need to be worked out, and I'm sure over time they will, but honestly, this is one of the better launches this year, and I applaud them for releasing an asymmetrical game that seems almost perfectly refined outside of a few areas. Balancing in games like this is a difficult task, and it's pretty great as a starting point. Something I should mention though are the long wait times between matches. Finding a game and then waiting in the pre-lobby for everyone to be ready can sometimes take upwards of 5 minutes each time. I read online that this game reached a staggering 1 million players on launch day, and I was shaking my head because despite that claim, it felt like there were only a couple thousand people playing it. Starting a match is also dependent on getting a full team. If you were missing even one player, that lobby will disband, requiring you to try again. I get the need to have a full team for balancing reasons, but if this game ever loses a majority of its player base, finding matches is gonna take way longer. Another issue I took away from this game, probably one of the most annoying issues that I've faced, are the lobby dodgers. This is all on certain players. These guys will connect to your lobby and request the character you have selected, and most likely it is for good reason because they probably have a high level with that character. But they can't seem to take no for an answer, opting to just quit the lobby if they don't get what they want. For what it's worth, I think the request feature is a genius idea, but don't be salty when people beat you to a character that you want to play. In my case, I had Julie selected. I got a request to switch, to which I declined because she's my best character. Why would I give that up? But I've been on the opposite side, and I just kind of accept that I need to play a new character, which isn't inherently bad anyway. It adds diversity to the game, forcing you to try new characters. I had this happen to me as well every time I was lucky enough to get to play Leatherface. People would just bombard me with requests to switch characters, and then if I didn't comply with them, they'd just leave instead of accepting it. Half the fun is the spontaneity of these games, but so few people I guess seem to enjoy it. Also, I would like to say that the game seemed fairly balanced in if you wanted to play the killers versus the victims. I never had a problem finding a match as the killer or the victim, which is a huge positive because in a lot of other games, primarily Friday the 13th, playing as Jason was almost impossible because everybody wanted to play as him. So that's a plus going for this game. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a pretty fantastic experience that stands out from the rest of the competition in some unique ways. There are a lot of unlockables and upgrades to keep people that enjoy its formula playing for a while at least. Though I think its longevity will be solely dependent on the amount of post-launch support that the game receives in the coming months, and as of right now, there is no word on what players should expect to see. Just what players shouldn't expect to see. Here comes the bad news for people that didn't know. I just found out yesterday, but the developers have stated that they only attain the creative license to the first film, meaning that skins and maps from the other films in this franchise will not be a thing, which is very unfortunate considering that this franchise spans multiple decades with several different designs. I personally love the 2003 reboot. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies ever, and frig, it's a damn shame that we're not going to get anything related to it. So I'm not really sure what they can do with post-launch content because they can only go off the first film, which I feel like they covered a majority of that in the final build of the game. So I'm kind of scratching my head as to what they could add to it, but I guess we'll see. Regardless of that though, I am currently having a blast with it, and it'll probably remain in my rotation for the foreseeable future. If you asked me if this game was worth $60, I'd say yes, but it does really depend on how much you like this style of always online game that lacks any single player component. But if you have Game Pass, you should at least give it a try. I mean, it's free. It's not free technically, but you know what I mean. If you have Game Pass, you really aren't gonna lose anything by trying the game. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments because I genuinely want to know what people think about this game. So far, it seems generally positive, but there are some people that are really angry. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Most importantly, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's all for me. Peace out.